ThinkTech Hawaii covers stories that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell.
And I'm your co-host, Loire Winged.
In our show tonight, we'll cover some of the views that are being expressed these days on the rail issue.
We'll hear from Ben Cayetano, who is opposed to rail and champion of that suit, and some of his allies, Councilwoman Ann Kobayashi, Senator Sam Slom, Cliff Slater of HonoluluTraffic.com, and traffic engineer Panos Prevedouros.
We'll talk with Karen Nakamura of the Building Industry Association on BIA's views. And we try to talk with officials in the city who are supporting the rail project, but they declined to come on the show.
First, we caught up with City Councilwoman Ann Kobayashi to get her views. She's in the minority on the subject in the City Council.
Tell us about the rail project right now, where it stands.
Well, they're just pushing ahead with the rail project, even though all the approvals have not been received from the Federal Transit Authority. I mean, they even held a $30,000 groundbreaking ceremony, which is really a ceremony. But I keep asking the question, why do we need a train? Why do we have to bring a train to our islands, our beautiful islands, that'll only go 20 miles? I mean, a train is usually to go from San Francisco to Chicago or to LA. But to go from Kapolei to Ala Moana, we need a train? So I said, sure, we're worried about jobs. We need jobs. But go ahead, build that elevated fixed guideway. Build all the TOD, all the transit-oriented development stations. But then why do you have to put a train on it? Why can't we put one of these buses that they have in Europe and Asia that look like a train, act like a train, but you don't need track? That way we could eliminate having park and rides, because these buses could start in Ewa Beach, could start in Waianae, get right on the fixed guideway, and go into town. So my bottom question is always, why do we need a train to bring in jobs when we could do other forms of transportation? But those alternatives were never looked at. We never had the chance.
Now, one of the big concerns is that there's a steel-on-steel rail, an elevated steel-on-steel rail that's going to be cause all kinds of problems with noise and not be sustainable in Hawaii's environment. Have you heard those arguments, and what do you think about a steel-on-steel?
Yes, in fact, the condominiums that are in Kaka'ako, I think there are 5 or 7 of them, banded together and formed an alliance, because that train is going to go right by their windows, by their lanais. And it's every day from 4 in the morning till midnight. There's no holiday or weekends. That train goes by, that noisy steel-on-steel, from 4 in the morning till midnight.
Now, one of the concerns was the judiciary, the federal court. The justices there, or the judges there, were saying that they were concerned about the noise as well, and also security.
They've been saying that for a long time, sent letters to FTA that they don't want that rail to go right next to their building, but it's been ignored. And so they all had to recuse themselves because of this lawsuit, because they're so involved in this.
Then we talked with Senator Sam Slom to get his views. With Governor Cayetano, he's one of the named plaintiffs in the suit.
Okay, we're here with Senator Sam Slom, and tell us your thoughts on the rail project.
Well, I think there are many aspects of the rail project. First and foremost is that the public really didn't have any input. When they had the so-called town meetings, people went. They thought there was going to be an exchange of ideas. They were asked for their input. They gave it. Nothing was done because it was a done deal from the beginning. This goes back 20 years, 30 years. It's always been a project of steel on steel. It's always been more and more costly each and every time. This time, the published estimates are about $5.5 billion just for construction. We've done independent estimates, and we come up with a figure between $6 and $8 billion. Again, just for the construction costs. Then you've got operations, and then you've got maintenance. And when you put this in perspective, you say, how can we possibly afford this? How can our community afford this? Because we've got over $2 billion in sewer emergency projects, $1.5 billion in water main breaks. We know that we have a water main break almost every day during the year, every year. And then we have the pitiful condition of our highways as well. So the cost implications are number one. Number two would be the environmental implications. Number 3 would be the impact on businesses, and that's primarily where the Small Business Hawaii Entrepreneurial Education Foundation comes in. Look, we're a business organization, but it's not mutually exclusive that we're talking about environmental issues as well, because you can't have a good business climate, can't have a good investment climate, unless you have all of the pieces together, including the environmental aspects of it. And you certainly can't have a good business climate if you're draining so much money away for one project that particularly is not going to do what it was supposed to do. Remember that when we started out with this project, the argument was, we have to save the poor people over in Ewa, in the west side of Oahu. We've got to reduce congestion. And then Cliff Slater and others came up with a figure showing that, in fact, there would not be any reduction in congestion, and the city reluctantly had to agree with that. Secondarily, then, it was going to be jobs, local jobs we were going to create. Then it was found out that we don't have the skilled people on these kinds of projects locally, so we're going to have to import the jobs. Oh yeah, there may be some short-term temporary jobs that are created, but not long-term and not beneficial to the private sector.
We found Cliff Slater of HonoluluTraffic.com, a longtime opponent of rail, eager to express his position to us.
There's a lawsuit pending. What led to the lawsuit? You're a party to the lawsuit. You're one of the named plaintiffs?
Yes, we're the lead plaintiff.
Lead plaintiff.
HonoluluTraffic.com. And others are Governor Cayetano, Judge Walter Heen, former chair of the Democrat Party, the Hawaii 1,000 Friends, Sam Slom, and as you can see from the people, this is a community-wide issue. This is not one particular philosophy or another. It's across the board. Everybody is opposed to the elevated rail through town. There are other views on elevated rail outside of town or at grade light rail in town, etc. But everybody is opposed to the elevated rail in town.
What do you guys hope to achieve by the lawsuit?
We hope to get the court to say that the city has to follow the law. There are a number of issues. We've got 9 counts in our complaint. Primarily one that most people overlook, and I think the city has overlooked it, is Section 4F of the 1966 Transportation Act. If you think back to the 1960s when we were finishing off the interstate rail system, interstate highway system, and the federal dollars were being used to bring elevated highways through towns, and it led to a great deal of uproar from the citizenry because they were so ugly. And so it led to this particular act, which is only applicable to transportation issues, rail, bus, highway. And what it said essentially was, if you're going to use federal dollars to build a transportation facility, then you must ensure that it does everything possible to avoid historic places, native burial sites, parks, etc.
Later, we were able to talk with Panos Prevedouros, an engineering professor at the School of Engineering at UH Manoa. He's run and lost for mayor twice on an anti-rail platform. If you lost twice, does that mean the public doesn't care, that the public wants to see rail?
I wouldn't go that far that, Panos and rail is synonymous, and just because, Panos got 20%, there is only 20% anti-rail vote. The mayor vote is quite complicated. People vote for the person, for their own reasons, and of course the possibility of the mega project. So definitely I got a solid part of the anti-rail vote, but there was also significant confusion because the person who actually won run on a platform of fiscal accountability. And quite a few people literally interpreted that, you know, obviously the economy is bad. He's not going to go for the $6 billion project. Peter Carlisle, who actually won the race, it was a winner-take-all, and he got something a little over 30%. And he ran on a platform of fiscal accountability. And quite a few people, and you know, people have very little attention for politics, more or less. They caught that from his TV commercials, and they interpreted that, well, obviously the economy is poor, so how could he possibly go for the $6 billion project that we really, as we know, we don't need it and we cannot afford it? So they said he's a reasonable guy, he's a funny guy, and he's for fiscal accountability. Therefore, he will put the brakes on it. And the first thing he did is to go on a trip to Washington and take a second trip and this and that. And of course, now he is the single project mayor, much to the disappointment of everybody. Truth to be told, the rail project is going forward. I don't know how far, but is making progress according to the rules of how the game is being played. There are two major obstacles for it. The lawsuit, because I believe that the lawsuit is quite strong. There were significant violations of the NEPA process, but that's not for me to do. Of course, I'm giving you an opinion. The judge will opine whether that's actually so. And the important thing is, even if he finds that, what types of ramifications he is going to recommend. Go back and redo a small part, a big part, restart altogether and put all kinds of alternatives there. So it could be a 1 month delay, it could be a 3 to 4 year delay. If it's a 3 to 4 year delay, it's almost game over, you know, because the project is completely sidetracked.
Then we caught up with former Governor Ben Cayetano and asked him about the background of the suit and his expectations in the matter.
Can you give us a little history on how the lawsuit came about?
Well, I think the lawsuit came about because there's so many people who were becoming increasingly frustrated with the lack of transparency and the one-sided public relations campaign that Mayor Hanneman was running. When you took a look at it and you saw how people were being misled, it was not only frustrating, but made me very angry. And so I think that there were many people who began to feel like that, and you felt powerless because the people on the city council, except for Charles DeJoux, I think, really did not challenge the Department of Transportation Services. And when you look at how the information is being presented, first you have Parsons Brinkhoff, which stands to gain maybe $200-300 million in fees from this project if it goes. So they have a self-interest in it. And then you got Mr. Yoshioka, who's a Parsons employee. His wife still works for Parsons, almost being a lead dog for the project with the city. You're not getting any objective voice, in my opinion. And so I began gravitating to people like Professor Panos and Cliff Slater. Those two guys are very, very knowledgeable about rail. And myself, I was chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House and the Senate for 6 years when I was in the legislature. And I got the opportunity to study Frank Farsi's HART program, which was a heavy rail project. And that gave me a real education on the politics of rail. And so, and that's why I'm involved. And, you got people like Walter Heen, and lately the League of Women Voters are joining us, and Hawaii 1,000 Friends. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, libertarians, Hawaiians, conservatives, business people. We disagree on many things, but on this one we agree that, one, the facts have not been accurately presented. Two, it is going to cost much more than they are saying. And three, the route that they choose will absolutely devastate the ocean front of the city of Honolulu.
Finally, we met with Karen Nakamura, the executive director of the Building Industry Association, to get BIA's views on the subject.
Our association came out with testimony for rail. And the reason it's a long-term view of what it will do for housing and for the communities and the affordability of homes in the future. Also, we have a situation where it takes over an hour to come in from West Oahu, when West Oahu was planned for almost 40 years ago on the general plan. So, you know, we don't build things until it's absolutely necessary. It's necessary. But the way our industry looks at it is rail will give us a strong base for construction. And, you know, it's going to take 30 years. Every single long-term infrastructure, H1, H2, H3, it took many years to build, and it's going to take many years to build. But I think that being said, we're looking at 50 years to 100 years from now. What will Honolulu, the city and county of Honolulu, look like? We are now the 13th largest city and county in the nation. Many people don't understand what that means. We compete in costs with New York, with Las Vegas, with Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle. We're a big city, and we need to think progressively as to where and how we're going to live. What rail does is it brings in the opportunity for communities to be built around the rail stations. It creates opportunities for small businesses to exist around the rail stations. Look at how it's done in Washington, D.C., DuPont Circle, and in San Francisco as well. My cousins live in Orinda, and there's a lot of small community built around the rail station. So I'm for it. We are for it, and we're looking for a better quality of life for the people of Honolulu. As far as the affordability, I think that the longer it takes, the more expensive it's going to be. And with all of these protests and with all of the lawsuits that are being filed, I think it just prolongs the agony.
So the controversy continues, and with this suit, rail is still by no means a sure thing. And even in a new administration under a new mayor, the city is still careful about controlling information on the subject. We regret they were not willing to appear on our show.
You know, as much as some people think that rail is a done deal, it may not be. And this one suit by Ben Cayetano and his friends, it may not be the end of the suits. There also are issues about procurement and contracting that are going to come up, and there are condemnation suits. You know, I think the public may have second thoughts about this going forward. Even now, the city council is not united on the matter.
Right. Well, with the city council not being united and they're trying to hear from the people, obviously when billions of dollars is involved, it's going to continue to be controversial. And now here's our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
As we mentioned earlier, on June 23rd, ThinkTech, Hawaii Venture Capital Association, and Pacific New Media will present Hawaii's big projects. Why are they stuck? This program will feature Governor Ben Cayetano on rail, Attorney Jerry Sumida on Big Wind, State Representative Joe Suki on the Super Ferry, Tony Ching, Executive Director of the Hawaii Community Development Association on the Kaka'ako Biotech Campus, and Jadine Urasaki of the Airports Division of the State Department of Transportation on our pending airport upgrade. What an exciting cast.
On July 8th, the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum will present its annual Energy Day celebration at the Laniakea Women's Y on Richard Street. Reserve your seat for this program on hepf.org.
And on July 28th, ThinkTech, HVCA, and Pacific New Media will present a luncheon program at the Plaza Club entitled The New Public Utilities Commission, featuring a panel of commissioners and staff from the PUC.
And now let's catch up with entrepreneurs Ray-Chung Fujihira and Hassan Scott in their efforts to start what they call a co-working business in Hawaii.
As we left it last week, you were going to open a pop-up at 307 Kamani Street. What happened?
The space is already a beautiful space, but it's really putting in the things that you need to work. So desks, getting the internet set up. We went and found some vintage chairs so we could, work on the budget, made our own desks, because we're working on a budget. So we did a lot of that, also securing parking in the area. The legal and banking aspects, so we've been working on that. We went down to the bank and they needed to get an operating agreement, and looking over our old operating agreement, we decided that we need to change a few things because our business model had changed. So we've been going, delving into the operating agreement and making new arrangements. Vesting over a number of years, percentages and things of this nature. So we did that, and then we try to go get the DBA because we have a name now, but it's a furlough, it's a holiday, so they're closed. So we're gonna have to do that, sometime early next week. We're going back in and reaching out to people that we met over the past 10 months and telling them, okay, here we are, and inviting them to come down for the soft opening, which is going to be on Monday. Working on the website and starting to do the social media, trying to figure out ways to integrate it that makes sense for the company. Not just doing it just to do it, but doing it with some kind of purpose. Finally, working on a presentation because, next week I have a big meeting and there's some meetings. I'm going to California as well. So really getting our presentation together so we can try to get money. I think that's the key ingredient, right? So that's pretty much what we did this week. Next week is going to be our opening, so I'm looking forward to sharing with you how it goes.
And now here's Bill Spencer, president of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association, with this week's Spensation. Bill, that speech by Richard Lim a couple of weeks ago really opens up a whole discussion on Hawaii's economy.
Right after the Richard Lim speech, the Advertiser came out with a generally supportive editorial, but later the following week, one of the columnists came out with a very defensive editorial about, how tourism was still here to stay, and this was the only growth sector of the economy, and I was pretty surprised about that, especially because a couple days later, U.S. Department of Commerce poll analysis came out that ranked Hawaii 44th in the United States in economic activity. So that's a 1.2% increase in 2010 over 2009. That's really abysmal, and it's been the same year after year after year. So, the evidence continues to point to the need to diversify the economy.
Well, maybe it's impossible, Bill. We're in the middle of the ocean. We don't have any manufacturing industry. We don't have any natural resources other than our environment. Maybe we just can't do it.
We have intellectual property. We have technology capacity that can be exported. I think that's the key. We're just not focused on the right thing. We're focused on importing people into Hawaii to spend their money here. We're not focused on exporting goods, services, and intellectual property, which grows the economy. It creates revenues that can be taxed and contribute to the general welfare of the state. It will create jobs. We have evidence that a growing tech sector will create jobs. And, that's another issue that showed up this week in yesterday's Wall Street Journal. Of the 722,000 new jobs that have been created since the recession was declared over in June of 2009, Hawaii was, of course, down at the bottom again. Over that 2-year period, we've created only 1,000 new jobs, less than 1,000.
Going back to Richard Lim's speech, what strikes me is that if you think around the world, you don't really find any 21st century economies that are based exclusively on tourism.
It's true.
Even if the tourism is successful, they become backwater in other ways. It's a spiral down to limit yourself to tourism as the exclusive economy. We really have to do something.
Jay, it's getting drear. We need to turn up the heat.
Yeah.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech. But first, we want to thank our underwriters.
Thanks to the Scheidler Family Foundation. Jay Scheidler, through the Scheidler Family Foundation, supports a number of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
Hawaiian Electric Company. Kiko and its affiliates Miko on Maui and Helco on the Big Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho. Galen Ho is the Senior Executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company which has a large presence in and commitment to Hawaii. Galen is also now the CEO of CBI Polymers. Congratulations, Galen.
Oceanit, a local tech company, is one of Hawaii's largest and most diversified science and engineering companies.
Okay, Lori, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Dukoishi does, and Lori too.
You bet, Jay. For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a sponsor. Help us reach Hawaii.
I'm Jay Fidell. Thanks for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Lori Wingard. Aloha, everyone.